Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring today's video. All right, today I just wanted to tell you all how I pull dark roast coffees, or really a style of shot that I've become very accustomed to when it comes to dark roast coffees. Let's kind of take a step back and think about how we pull darks versus lights. A very general recommendation from many people is if you're pulling a light roast coffee, use a very high temperature, and if you're using a dark roast coffee, use a lower temperature. And let's specifically focus on the dark roast coffees here, is that because if you use too high of a temperature, you extract too fast and things will be bitter or burnt. But what's interesting about dark roast coffees is that it also can depend on what grinder you're using. And this is down to this whole entire crazy conversation of grinder extraction efficiency. We'll save that for another day. What I want to discuss today is just kind of how you do it, just a TLDR. I want to introduce kind of a counterintuitive way of pulling dark roast coffees. And this can also be applied to light roasts, and we'll talk about that in another video, is for you dark roast drinkers out there, what you can do is grind really, really fine, use a really high temp, and pull short. Two things are pretty straightforward there. Dark roast, grind pretty fine for it, and using a shorter ratio makes sense for you Ristretto drinkers. But using a high temp is where it's kind of counterintuitive, and that's because with extraction, you can extract in a variety of ways. Temperature, grind size, how fast your burrs extract. There are a lot of different variables, but what I found is that this works incredibly well if you have a slower flowing traditional style grinder like the Niche Zero, many of these hand grinders, Lagom Mini. So what's really interesting is the actual result in cup. So I think a lot of you folks are drinking stuff like this. You're drinking your lights, your ultra lights, all this good stuff here, Rip Harkin. And I think it makes sense because a lot of people are very attracted to high-end equipment. You need sometimes high-end equipment to pull lighter roast coffees. But the thing with this style of shot is that I think you just bypass a lot of the properties people dislike in dark roasts. So if I think about what I actually hate in dark roast coffees, it's generally the bitterness. When I drink a dark roast coffee, if that is the first thing that I am tasting, it is just such a turnoff. And when you're dialing in a dark roast coffee, how you can kind of get less of that in cup is, well, lower the temperature, extract slower, tighten up the ratio a bit, use less water basically. But with using a higher temperature, what seems to occur is a lot of this creaminess and sweetness gets extracted from a dark roast, and there's more of that in the cup, and it's all beautiful texture. I've had espresso shots where it's just straight up all crema and texture, and it's just like, that's the stuff that I really like. And the reason also why that occurs is because, well, if you're using a dark roast coffee, there's just more crema, more CO2. It just seems like that higher temperature bypasses a lot of that bitterness. But I will say that this does not just eliminate all bitterness. At the end of the day, it's still gonna be a dark roast coffee, but I think it's because you use that higher temperature, you get more of this good texture, good sweetness into the espresso, and it's just kind of like drinking sweet cream. Of course, this depends on what type of dark roast coffee you're using, what the mix of beans are and all of that. But I think just generally speaking, it's really interesting. So I want to now talk a little bit about the profiles that I'm using for this. Honestly, you could use a flat profile with this, but what I've been doing is just decent default profile, which is just run at like 4.5 mils per second until you hit like 3 to 4 bars, then you ramp the pressure up and you lower the flow rate. You do this with a variety of profiles. I found I just like lever profiles the best for this. And it's just kind of also like commonly diagnosing problems. Like if you pull a 1 to 2 dark roast and it tastes bitter, general recommendation is we'll just shorten the ratio, use less water. A lot of that occurs here, but the point here is like, let's get less of those crazy bitters that you could get because you're over extracting and replace them with this sweet cream texture that occurs, and that's there because of the finer grind and higher temperature. And for those of you who are more nerdy about things, please let me know what you think about this. I just have really enjoyed this style of shot. Just want to interrupt the video real quick by thanking today's video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online courses and members across 150 countries. You can basically learn about anything you want, and when you sign up, you can get personalized suggestions and explore pretty much any topic you want. I've actually been really enjoying a class from Michael Phillips. He's the director of training at Blue Bottle Coffee. I've never seen a class that just breaks down complex coffee topics in such an easy and digestible way, and that's seen in Michael's class From Plant to Cup, Brew an Amazing Cup of Coffee. I just love how simple Michael makes it to understand how to take a complex topic like tasting coffee and taking a property such as acidity and interpreting that as a flavor note in cup when you drink coffee. And that's just because of how these topics are broken down in a really easy, digestible lesson format that you can find when you use Skillshare. I also really like that there is a transcript for each of the sections of the video, so you ensure that you don't miss anything. If you want to learn from people just like Michael, you can use the link below. The first 1,000 people to use the link below or code brianquanyt will receive 1 month free of Skillshare. So now let's kind of shift gears and talk a bit about what if you have a fast extracting flat. Say you don't own any Zero, you don't own any of these conicals, and you have like a DF64 with SSP multi-purpose. How can you also achieve something similar, or how would you also use a style of profile? So you can actually do it, but the recommendation that I will say is just you cannot grind as fine as you would on your conical. It's not to say that you cannot pull traditional styles of shots on some of these higher, faster flowing flats. It's just that with these dark roast coffees, you have to be very, very careful with how much water you're using, and you really just want to extract slow. So you can definitely try to adjust grind size there. Unfortunately, you have to compromise on the more traditional texture that you probably would prefer out of a conical and in a dark roast. However, you will retain some of the sweet cream effect that occurs because of the higher temperature. So I really wouldn't use this if you are using a fast flowing flat. However, you can try, but you're gonna need to adjust some of your grind size there. But I would highly recommend you experiment with this style of shot. This shot by no means is the end-all be-all way to pull dark roast coffees. I just think it's really fun. It's super fun to taste a dark roast that just, in my opinion, doesn't give me the impression that it's a dark roast. And that's just because the thing that I am initially tasting is this like really sweet cream crema effect that occurs. So it's quite interesting, and I hope you all experiment with it. What I am telling you is not going to be the silver bullet to whatever coffee you're pulling. I've just found this to work out quite well with the coffees I'm using. I am currently using GMC Grand Michele Le Carmo from Cafe Lusso, and I found that pulling ristrettos, short ratio, high temp works really well, and it tastes great. And I'm not really a dark roast drinker. So that's all I wanted to share with you all today. If you have any questions, let me know. But I would really like it if people discussed about this, because it's been a while since I've talked about profiles and talked about like how to make coffee. And I think this is just really fun. It's like, this is a dark roast. You all probably hate dark roast, but maybe doing this will make you hate dark roast a little bit less. So thank you again for spending the time to watch the video. I'll see you guys around.